Imagine you've got a splitting headache. You go to the doctor, he takes one look at you, sniffs your urine, checks what phase the moon is in, and then drills a hole into your skull to let the evil spirits out. That's not a horror movie. That's just Tuesday in medieval Europe. Medieval doctors weren't stupid. A lot of them were actually some of the most educated people alive. They just had access to completely wrong information, and they followed it with total confidence. And the results were absolutely unhinged. So today, we're going into exactly what they believed, why they believed it, and the specific treatments that will make you very, very grateful to live in the 21st century. To understand medieval medicine, you have to understand one idea that dominated everything: the four humors. The ancient Greek physician Hippocrates, yeah, the guy the Hippocratic Oath is named after, came up with a theory that the human body was controlled by four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Every illness, every personality trait, every mood you've ever had, all of it was caused by an imbalance of one of these four liquids. Too much blood, you're overly cheerful and need to be bled. Too much black bile and you're depressed. The word melancholy literally means black bile in Greek. Too much yellow bile, you're angry. Too much phlegm, you're sluggish and cold. That's where the word phlegmatic comes from. The cure for basically everything was to get the humors back in balance, which usually meant one of four things: bleeding the patient, making them vomit, giving them a laxative, or making them sweat. Sometimes all four at once. This theory wasn't fringe, it wasn't controversial, it was the medical consensus for over 1,000 years, taught in every university, followed by every doctor, and it was almost entirely wrong. The truly wild part: Hippocrates himself was actually pretty good at observing patients and letting the body heal naturally. But his followers took his ideas, ran with them in a completely wrong direction, and accidentally created a medical system that probably killed more people than it saved. If medieval medicine had a greatest hit, it was bloodletting. Headache, bleed you. Fever, bleed you. Broken leg, honestly, probably bleed you. The idea was that removing blood would rebalance your humors and let your body recover. And doctors took this very seriously. They had charts, actual astrological charts, showing which vein to cut depending on what was wrong with you and what sign the moon was in. The vein behind your ear was for headaches, the vein under your tongue was for throat problems. They all had it mapped out. The tool they used was called a lancet, basically a small blade. They'd cut a vein and let you bleed into a bowl. A typical session might drain anywhere from a pint or 2 pints of blood. For context, the human body only holds about 10 pints total, so they were taking up to 20% of your blood volume at a time. If you got worse after the first bleeding, which statistically you probably did because you now had less blood, the answer was to bleed you again. The most famous victim of bloodletting is almost certainly George Washington. In December of 1799, he developed a throat infection, probably epiglottis, which is serious but survivable with modern antibiotics. His doctor bled him 4 times in 24 hours, removing roughly 40% of his blood, and he died the next day. Most historians believe the bleeding killed him faster than the infection would have. Bloodletting didn't fully disappear from mainstream medicine until the late 1800s, which is terrifying. Here's something that will change how you think of doctor appointments. Medieval physicians were obsessed with urine. Like, genuinely obsessed. Uroscopy, the art of diagnosing illnesses by examining pee, was considered the highest skill a doctor could have. There were entire textbooks on it, illustrated textbooks with color charts. A doctor would look at a urine sample and assess its color, clarity, smell, foam, and sediment. Some even tasted it. Different characteristics pointed to different diagnoses. Dark yellow meant fever. Cloudy meant kidney problems. Sweet tasting? Yeah, they actually tasted it. Could indicate what we know now as diabetes, since uncontrolled diabetes makes urine literally sweet due to excess sugar. The last one is actually correct, by the way. The medical term for diabetes, mellitus, translates roughly to honey urine disease. So uroscopy wasn't entirely useless, it just happened to be right for mostly the wrong reasons. The urine flask became such a symbol of medical profession that in medieval art, if you want to show someone was a doctor, you just drew them holding a flask of pee. It was the stethoscope of its day. Okay, this is the section that you came for. Some of the weirdest treatments included: 1. Trepanation. drilling a hole in someone's skull is actually one of the oldest surgical procedures we know of. We found skulls from 7,000 years ago with neat circular holes drilled in them. Medieval doctors used it for headaches, epilepsy, and mental illness on the theory that it released the pressure of evil spirits. Incredibly, some patients survived. Even more incredibly, some of the ancient skulls show signs of bone regrowth around the holes, meaning people lived for years after the procedure. Theriac, this was a catch-all medicine that was basically the medieval equivalent of a multivitamin, except it contained up to 64 ingredients including viper flesh, opium, and beaver castor glands. It was supposed to cure everything from the plague to snake bites. It took months to prepare, it cost a fortune, and it almost certainly did nothing except get you a little high from the opium. Applying a live pigeon to the body. For plague symptoms, some doctors recommended cutting a live pigeon in half and pressing the warm, still living body against the patient's swollen lymph nodes. The logic was that the pigeon would draw out the poison. The actual effect was that you now had a dying pigeon on your buboes, which did not help. My personal favorite, bathing in human urine for skin conditions, we're gonna leave it there. Another was eating powdered mummy. From roughly the 12th to the 17th century, ground up Egyptian mummies were a legitimate medicine sold in pharmacies across Europe. They were used for everything from headaches to internal bleeding. Demand got so high that sellers started faking it, grinding up fresh corpse and selling them as ancient mummies. The fact that fake mummy was a thing tells you a lot about how seriously people took it. Here's the thing though, and I genuinely mean this, medieval doctors weren't idiots. They were working with the best information available to them, and in some areas they were surprisingly sophisticated. Islamic physicians during the medieval period, people like Ibn Sina, which I might not be pronouncing right at all, known in Europe as Avicenna, wrote medical encyclopedias that accurately described contagious diseases, quarantine, and clinical trials centuries before Europe caught up. His book, The Canon of Medicine, was used as a medical textbook in European universities until the 1600s. Medieval surgeons actually developed real skills under battlefield conditions. Wound care, amputation, or even basic anesthesia using herbal mixtures of hemlock and opium, these guys were learning real things through brutal trial and error. And some of their herbal remedies actually worked. A recipe from a 9th century Anglo-Saxon medical text called Ball's Leechbook, yeah, that's the real name, described a remedy for eye infections made from garlic, onion, wine, and bile from a cow's stomach. In 2015, researchers at the University of Nottingham tested it in a lab against MRSA, one of the most antibiotic-resistant bacteria we know of. It killed 90% of the bacteria. A 1,000-year-old recipe beat modern superbugs. So the lesson isn't that the medieval doctors were stupid. The lesson is that even smart, educated, well-meaning people can be catastrophically wrong when the foundational theory they're working from is incorrect. Which honestly makes you wonder, what were we confidently doing today that people 500 years from now are going to find completely unhinged? Medieval doctors were weird, yes, but they were also doing their best in a world where the answers just weren't there yet. Which, if you think about it, is kind of what all of us are doing all the time. If this video taught you something, or if the pigeon thing made you feel physically ill, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more of this stuff, and drop a comment with the most disgusting medieval fact that you already knew, because I want to know what you've been sitting on. See you in the next one.